For the taillights here, I built these little boxes and I am setting these taillight units into them. Now that I've got the lights on the outside, I'm wiring everything up on the inside. You can see here's, I refer to as a mess of wires. This is at the rear. Got my little indicator lights here. These are the clearance lights on the left and the right. And so I'm going to wire the wires from the front onto those, and I'm soldering all the connections, and then I'm putting heat shrink on them. So for these, just want to strip the ends here, and then I'll hook them all together and solder them. I've got two lights here. One goes forward and one goes sideways. So one tactical issue is that these wires here, the low voltage wire, does not have any marking on it. What it does have is it's got texture on one side and the other side's smooth. So I'm going to assume that texture is ground and smooth is the side with voltage. So on these ones here, if I remember correctly, black is hot and white is ground. So I'll just twist these guys on here. Alrighty, and then I'll just hook up voltage and see if I got it right. So I said texture is ground, and then smooth is hot. Just plug them in, and you can see they started glowing. This one here is not glowing. Let's see. Put it backwards. Black is hot. So one thing that's good to note is that LEDs only work one direction. Like a incandescent bulb will work with current flowing either direction because it's just a resistive filament that gets hot. But a light emitting diode is a diode, and for some reason diodes only work one direction. Why? I'm not 100% sure. But now that I reverse these, so white is ground, black is hot, put them on. Now they're both glowing. You can see that glow, the other glow. This is some nice 6337, so it's 63% tin, 37% lead. And it's a rosin core solder, so it basically, the rosin makes it stick, makes the solder stick to the copper. So when you solder, you want to heat up your iron, and then you get a little dot on the end, and you just make the copper hot, and then you touch the solder to the copper itself, and just soak the copper filaments here with the solder, and then that's all done. And you can see the smoke is the rosin burning off. One thing with these soldering irons is that if you keep holding the button down, they'll get so hot that it'll glow red and then it doesn't stick to anything. And now that those are soldered, I'll take my heat shrink and heat shrink those. So right here I've got a whole bunch of heat shrink. This stuff is super cheap. You can get like 500 pieces for $5 or something off eBay. And the really good stuff is glue core. That's what you want if it's going to get wet. This isn't glue core, but it doesn't really matter. These are all inside tiny house. And so you want to find a piece and make sure it fits over your connection and a little bit of the adjacent insulation. So heat guns are great, and what you do is you heat it up a little bit and then you torch the ends. You see that shrinks right down. It's good and hot. This way, get good and hot. And be careful where you set your heat gun down, so it will melt things. And then I generally take my cutters And I'm going to squish these ends here just because then nothing can stick down inside. You see how that like squishes down nice. So now that's not going to get any wire or anything stuck in it. It's not going to short out. Before I wire the rest of the building, I need to kind of make my little room here where I'm going to put my breaker box, my inverter, and breaker panels over here. And after I finish this little wall here around the mechanical room, the next thing I'll do is start running wire. So I have two types of wire to run. I've got my low voltage, the 12 volt for lights and the bathroom fan and other low voltage applications like that. And then I'll also have the high voltage for the outlets, and it'll run the stove and refrigerator and air conditioning, all that stuff. It'll run from the inverter. And so here I have a diagram of exactly what I want to put in. And this is what I originally drew back in the day for what I wanted this layout to look like. And I've changed it a little bit, but not too much, based on how things just happen to fit. For instance, this washer and utility room, it's just not going to fit in the space designed. All I have is a utility room. It's a diagonal door, and everything got shifted down. I have more bins here, and so it's similar, but not exactly the same. But the top here is just the layout, and the next one is where I want the electrical to run. So you can see in the bathroom here, I'll have a light, two switches, and a vent. So the light and the vent are both going to be 12 volt, or the vent fan, I should say. Obviously you don't need electricity for a vent, but you do for a fan. So that will enable me to run a single 12 volt from my AC, or not AC, but my DC to DC converter that goes from 48 volt to 12 volt. So I'll run a single wire over to the switch, and then one wire each to the light, and to the vent I'll have two switches. So you can turn on the light or the vent or both, or just the vent, you know, that type of deal. Around down the center here, I have 1, 2, 3. I think I'm going to run four lights down the middle. I'm not going to offset this one on the end here. I'm going to have, instead of the AC being there, it's going to be over here, and the condenser or radiator, I guess the inside part's the condenser, whatever. The radiator bit's going to be on the tongue there, so I'll have AC power there. All these lights here down the edge are going to be 12 volt. So what I'm probably going to do is just run 12 volt lines to a box, and then later when I build the cabinets I'll actually put in this second wiring here and these lights. The switch here over the couch, I'm not sure I'll have lights over the couch. I don't see why I would need to, but I will definitely have a large light in the middle here, and then lights over my desk, and a light in the mechanical room here. I have yet to procure outdoor lights, but I'll need an outdoor light. And then all of these things here are outlets, so it's a 20/20. Those are 20 amp outlets. I was originally going to have 20 amp and 15 amp, but then I decided I just go 20 everywhere because I happen to get a huge roll of 12 gauge wire which will run 20 amp circuits. And so yeah, I'm going to have all 20s all the way down the line. My washer and dryer will be here, that'll have a 20. I'll probably have a 20 under the cabinet for the fridge, a 20 over the cabinet that'll run the oven and microwave. The 20 under the cabinet will also probably run the stove, so I'll have two plugs and two things plugged into it. And then I might have two under the cabinet just in case I have a 120 volt pump. I'd like to get a 12 volt pump, I don't know what I'll do there. But then I'll also have a bunch of outlets over here. This 10 is 10 outlet boxes. So that won't all be outlets. I'm going to also run Ethernet from my mechanical room down to the desk area. And so I'll have 4 Ethernets. I could run, computer, laptop, like desktop computer, laptop computer, and Raspberry Pi or something, and have just extra wires. Extra wires are always good. So what I'm going to do next is run the low voltage and the high voltage. I started stringing the wires here through holes that I've drilled. And this is 12 gauge wire. I'm running 20 amp circuits for outlets to the front here. So I have 2 outlets in the front, maybe one on the side. More outlets doesn't hurt. There's supposed to be a limit to how many outlets you put on a single run, but I think I'm well within that limit. It's like 7 or 10 or something like that. And honestly, the limits are somewhat arbitrary, so I'm not going to let them bother me too much. I have one strand here for the outlet specifically, and I think I want to run a second that goes to the air conditioner. Like, why would I run so many, you might ask? The air conditioner will draw off the same inverter charge controller gizmo that only outputs 3000 watts. So obviously I'm going to be pretty close to the limit, right? Well, 20 amps, it's what, 2400 watts or something. It's not quite 3000 watts, so in theory I could draw more. But more than that, I want the breakers to breaker individual appliances, or at least individual groups of things. So I would want a power tool to be able to pop a breaker and not necessarily shut off everything else. Like, say a power tool pops a breaker, I want that to only kill the outlets. I don't want it to shut off the air conditioning as well. The air conditioning might not be running at the moment, thereby allowing the circuit breaker to pop, because without overdrawing the overall system. But then later it'll kick on, or maybe the wash machine and something else kick on at the same time, and it overloads the whole system, and that shuts off and then resets. And I just want to be able to individually breaker things, and I have 6 breaker slots, so I should have plenty of space. All of this here is 12 by 2, and whenever they say 12 by 2, they actually mean it's 3 strand, and so you've got a hot, neutral, I guess they call it, and a ground, and so it's a 1-phase electrical wiring. When they say 12 by 3, then they're talking about 4, so you've got a neutral, 1-phase, 2-phase, and your ground. And then obviously 3-phase, you'd have 5. So all I'm going to have is 1-phase. My inverter charge controller does 1-phase. I could get a second inverter charge controller, put them both on the wall, sync them together, run the outputs into a 2-phase box, and run 2-phase to something, but I don't need to. Over here I have what could be accurately described as a mess of wires. I wrote on them all and labeled them so I know what they are. But yeah, I need to tidy that up. I need to put a vent in right here before I can insulate it there. I have it wired but no vent. I need to wire the ceiling light in the bathroom. So I've got quite a bit of stuff to do. I'm not going to get bored. I was hoping to have this done by the Feast of Tabernacles, but I don't think that's going to be happening. I've got the Ethernet cables installed. These are Cat 6 Ethernet cables, which means they should be good up to 10 gigabits per second. So I've got the last lines run here. Here we have the gas line, runs in the front. I also ran the AC line, comes in here, goes over and around, down the side, and it'll eventually curve up to an AC unit there. I was going to put the AC unit at the end, but it doesn't fit, so it's not happening. Anyway, the gas line runs in from where the gas tanks are on the front. He comes along down the side here. It's all shadowed, but he eventually winds up over there, which is where the hot water heater is going to be, over here, and then the dryer's next to it. So the next thing I have to do, now that every single wire and every single line, tube, hose, all the stuff in the floor, at least in this end of the trailer, is now run. So now I'm going to take insulation and start filling these voids here in the floor. Here's what I have so far tonight. These two sections here, insulated. It's one board cut to length, so it looks pretty good. I'll have to pull that board up, it's not screwed down, but I'll lift it up and insulate on the edges. One thing I'm not going to do is insulate over top of the water tank. I need to put another foam bead around the edge so that it brings this foam here up to plane or even slightly above, so it'll seal up nice. But I'm not going to insulate over the center of the tank here. The bat will cover this, but over the center of the tank I'll only insulate the edges. That way some of the heat from the tiny home will sink down into the tank and help keep it thawed when it's freezing out. Now that I've got all the insulation done on the floor, this is what it looks like. You can see there's the tank showing. There's a copper line running through for gas. But over the sections where there aren't any tanks, I've insulated the entire floor. So then I just need to put down floorboards on top of that, and the floor will be pretty much done except for maybe some sort of varnish or stain or something like that. The next step that I have is to install the electrical panels. Actually, basically need to put a piece of insulation in here, and I'll have to cut it where all these wires go through and stuff and tuck it back into the slot. But after that, I'm going to take and I'm going to put a whole bunch of boards across, so there'll be a nice face, and I'll drill holes in it and run these wires through it to my electrical panels, and I'll mount my inverter charge controller here, and then I'll have probably the AC circuit breaker panel here, and I'll have a DC circuit breaker and switch panel here. Now that I've got all these boards here, there's a nice backing to hang the inverter and the various breakout power panels on. And I have everything wired in here that's going to be wired in. I'm going to insulate this guy and start covering it with the cedar, and then I will put in some outlets and cut holes for the outlet boxes. After I do that, I will be able to probably put wood over here too on this side, and then hang the inverter there and put in the AC panel and start wiring up all my circuits. And that'll be really nice because then I'll be able to have my LED lights. I'll install those and should light up quite nicely in here.